It is a Thursday afternoon at the grocery store, and you are standing in the dairy aisle with your cart half full. A block of cheddar, $6.99. A small tub of cream cheese, 8 ounces, $3.49. Next to it, a little plastic container labeled herb and garlic spreadable cheese, also 8 ounces, $5.99, which works out to almost $12 a pound for something that is mostly cream cheese with dried herbs stirred through it. If your family goes through cheese like this every week, sandwiches, crackers, a spread for the bread at supper, you are looking at $15 to $25 a week without even noticing it, which adds up to somewhere between $700 and $1,200 a year. Now picture a different kitchen. A pot of milk on the stove just starting to steam. A small bowl with the juice of 2 lemons squeezed into it, sitting on the counter. 45 minutes later, a clean piece of cheesecloth tied into a bundle and hanging over a bowl, and inside it, somewhere between a pound and a pound and a half of fresh cheese. The total cost for that batch is about $5, and most of those 45 minutes are spent doing other things while the milk heats and the cheese drains. The method I am about to show you is one of the oldest ways of making cheese that exists, and it does not require rennet, it does not require aging, it does not require a cheese cave or special cultures you order online. It requires milk, an acid, and salt. That is the entire ingredient list. 3 things, most of which you already have in your kitchen right now. This is not a new discovery, and it is not unique to any one family or any one place. In India, this same basic method, heating milk and adding an acid to separate the curds, produces paneer, the firm cheese used in curries and stir-fries that holds its shape when you cook it. In Mexico and across Latin America, the same principle produces queso fresco, the crumbly white cheese on tacos and salads. In Germany and across Eastern Europe, it produces what is called quark, or farmer's cheese, soft and spreadable, used the way we use cream cheese. In Italy, a version of this same idea, applied a second time to the leftover liquid, produces ricotta. And in Pennsylvania Dutch kitchens, including the one I grew up in and the one I cook in now, it produces what my mother always called schmierkäse, a soft, mild cheese my grandmother spread on bread for as long as anyone in my family can remember. I am Sarah Yoder. My mother taught me to make this cheese when I was about 10 years old, standing on a stool at the stove because I was too short to see into the pot otherwise. In the next 20 or so minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly how it works, the simple chemistry of what happens inside that pot, the 3 ingredients and what each one is actually doing, the method, step by step, with the reason behind every step, the honest list of what can go wrong and how to fix it, what to do with the leftover liquid because it is not waste, a few variations that turn this one method into several different things you currently buy at the store, and the real cost math at the end. One thing before we get into it. There is more to this, more variations, more of the old methods my family has used for generations than fits into any single video. I gathered all of it into a book, and the link is in the description if you want it. I will not mention it again in this video. Now, the chemistry, explained plainly, because once you understand what is happening, every step that follows will make sense, instead of feeling like a list of rules to follow blindly. Milk looks like a uniform white liquid, but at a microscopic level it is full of tiny clusters of protein called casein micelles floating evenly throughout the liquid. These clusters carry a slight negative electrical charge, and because like charges repel each other, the clusters stay pushed apart from one another, suspended evenly through the milk. This is why milk stays liquid and uniform rather than separating on its own. When you add an acid, lemon juice or vinegar, to the milk, you are lowering its pH, making it more acidic. As the pH drops and approaches a specific point, around 4.6, which happens to be the same number that matters in yogurt making, something changes about those casein clusters. The acid neutralizes the negative charge that was keeping them apart. Without that charge pushing them away from each other, the clusters are suddenly free to clump together. And they do, immediately and visibly. That clumping is what you see as curds, and the liquid left behind, now lacking the proteins that have clumped together and fallen out of suspension, is the whey. Heat plays a supporting role in this. The high heat of the milk before you add the acid means the reaction happens fast and completely, and it also helps the curds firm up and release more of the liquid trapped inside them, which means more cheese and less moisture left behind. This is also why this method works so quickly compared to yogurt. Yogurt uses bacteria that slowly produce acid over 6 to 8 hours, gently lowering the pH across the whole batch at once, which is why yogurt sets as one solid mass, a gel, rather than separating into curds and liquid. This method skips the slow bacterial fermentation entirely and gets straight to the same pH point using acid you add directly, which is why it takes minutes instead of hours, and why instead of one solid mass, you get distinct curds separated from liquid whey. Now, the 3 ingredients and what each one is actually doing. The first is milk. Whole milk gives you the richest result and the most cheese from a given amount of milk, because more of the fat gets caught up in the curds along with the protein. 2% milk works and gives a slightly leaner result with somewhat less yield. Skim milk works, but produces curds that are drier and a bit more crumbly, with the least yield of the 3. Raw milk, if you have access to it, produces excellent results with a fuller flavor. All of these are fine choices depending on what you have and what you prefer. There is one type of milk that causes real problems, and I want to be honest with you about this because it is the single most common reason someone tries this, it does not work well, and they conclude the method itself is wrong. Ultra-pasteurized milk, often labeled UHT, the kind that comes in shelf-stable cartons that do not need refrigeration until opened, is heated to a much higher temperature during processing than standard pasteurized milk. That extreme heat changes the structure of the proteins in a way that is, for our purposes, permanent. Those proteins have essentially already been pushed partway toward the change that acid is supposed to cause. And when you then add acid to UHT milk, the response is weak. You get very little curd formation, a small, disappointing yield, and whey that often stays cloudy instead of turning clear. If you have a choice at the store, choose standard, refrigerated, pasteurized milk, not the shelf-stable UHT kind, and this method will work the way it is supposed to. The second ingredient is the acid. Fresh lemon juice gives the cheese a bright, clean flavor and is what I usually reach for. White vinegar is more neutral in taste and is the classic choice for paneer specifically. Apple cider vinegar gives a slight extra tang that some people like in a spreadable cheese. The amount you need is about a 1/4 cup of acid for every gallon of milk, or roughly 1 tablespoon per quart if you are working with a smaller batch. The third ingredient is salt, and its role is simple. It seasons the cheese, and it also acts as a light preservative, helping the finished cheese keep a little longer in the refrigerator. You add this at the end, after the curds have formed and drained, not at the beginning. That is the entire ingredient list: milk and acid and salt. Now let me walk you through the method, and at every step I want to tell you not just what to do, but why, because the why is what lets you troubleshoot if something looks different than you expect. Step 1. Pour your milk into a heavy-bottomed pot and heat it over medium heat, stirring occasionally so it does not scorch on the bottom. You are bringing it almost to a boil, to the point where it is steaming clearly and small bubbles are just beginning to form at the edges of the pot, somewhere around 200 degrees Fahrenheit if you are using a thermometer. This matters because the acid reaction works fastest and most completely when the milk is very hot. If the milk is only lukewarm when you add the acid, the curds will form slowly and incompletely, and you will be left with cloudy whey and a smaller yield than you should get. Step 2. Take the pot off the heat, or turn it down to the lowest possible setting, and pour in your measured acid. Stir gently, just 2 or 3 slow turns of the spoon, enough to distribute the acid through the milk, and then stop stirring. This matters for 2 reasons. Taking it off the heat prevents scorching while your attention is on the acid rather than the bottom of the pot, and stirring only gently and briefly matters because vigorous or continued stirring breaks the curds apart into smaller and smaller pieces as they form, which makes them harder to strain later and reduces how much cheese you end up with. A few gentle stirs to mix, then hands off. Step 3. Watch what happens over the next 30 seconds to 2 minutes. You will see distinct white clumps forming, the curds, and the liquid around them changing from opaque white to a clear, pale yellow-green color. That color change is your sign that the reaction has worked. The whey, once the proteins that were clouding it have clumped out as curds, is naturally a translucent yellow-green, almost like a very weak tea. If you look at the liquid and it still looks milky white rather than clear, the reaction is not complete. And the fix is simple. Add another tablespoon of acid, give it 1 or 2 more gentle stirs, and wait another minute. Repeat if needed. This is the most common point where something needs a small adjustment, and it is a very easy adjustment to make. Step 4. Once you have clear whey and well-formed curds, let the pot sit undisturbed for 10 to 15 minutes. This gives the curds time to firm up further and release more of the whey trapped inside them, which means a better yield and curds that hold together better when you strain them. Step 5. Line a colander with a few layers of cheesecloth or a clean, thin cotton dish towel if you do not have cheesecloth, and set the colander over a large bowl because what drips through is the whey, and we are going to use that, not throw it away. Pour the curds and whey into the lined colander and let it drain. Step 6, and this one is optional, depending on your taste. If you find the flavor too sharply lemony or vinegary for what you want to use the cheese for, you can run a little cool water gently through the curds while they are still in the cheesecloth. This mellows the acidic tang without changing the texture much. If you like the brighter flavor, skip this step entirely. Step 7. While the curds are still warm, sprinkle salt over them and gently work it in with a spoon or with your hands. Salting warm curds lets the salt distribute evenly through the cheese rather than just sitting on the outside surface, which is what happens if you salt it after it is cooled and firmed up. Step 8 is where you decide what you are making, because the same curds become different things depending on what you do next. If you want a soft, spreadable cheese, the kind you would use in place of cream cheese or as a base for a cheesecake, simply let the curds continue to drain in the cheesecloth for 30 minutes to an hour, then transfer them to a bowl. That is it. You have a soft, fresh cheese. If you want something firmer, the kind you can slice or cube, the kind that holds its shape when you cook it the way paneer does, gather the corners of the cheesecloth together and twist it into a bundle to squeeze out more whey by hand. Then set the wrapped bundle of curds on a plate, place another plate on top of it, and put some weight on top of that plate. A couple of heavy cans, a large jug filled with water, anything with some heft. Leave it for 1 to 4 hours, depending on how firm you want it. The longer it presses, the firmer and drier the result. After pressing, unwrap it, and you have a solid block of cheese you can slice, cube, or pan fry. My grandmother did this exact pressing step with a flat stone from the creek behind the farm, wrapped in a clean cloth, set on top of the wrapped curds on a plate. In a modern kitchen, a couple of cans of vegetables from the pantry do exactly the same job. The principle has not changed, only what is sitting on top. Now, the whey, the liquid left in that bowl underneath the colander. This is not waste, and I do not want you pouring it down the drain. Whey is full of protein, a little remaining lactose, and minerals, and it has a mild tang from the acid. You can use it in place of the water or milk called for in bread, pancake, or biscuit recipes, and it adds both nutrition and a slight tang, and its acidity reacts nicely with baking soda for a good rise. You can use it to soak oats overnight before cooking them. Diluted with an equal amount of water, it makes a fine occasional drink for the garden, particularly for tomatoes and other plants that do well with a little extra acidity. Or it can simply go into the compost. And here is something that surprises people. You can make a second, smaller batch of cheese from this same whey. Pour the whey back into a pot and bring it back up to nearly boiling again. A small amount of additional curds, usually just a few tablespoons worth, will form on the surface. This is, in fact, where the name ricotta comes from. It means recooked. It is a small bonus, not a full second batch, but it is cheese made from what most people throw away entirely, and it costs nothing extra. There is something I think about often with this kind of work. So much of what gets sold to us in small containers, the herb cheese spread, the tub of ricotta, the block of paneer in the international aisle, is the same basic process: milk plus acid, plus heat, dressed up differently, packaged in plastic, and priced as though it were something complicated. It is not. The complications are in the packaging and the marketing, not in the cheese. This is the kind of knowledge, the kind that lets you make several things from one simple process instead of buying each of them separately in its own little container, that my family has held on to for generations. And it is part of what is in the books alongside the garden knowledge, the food preservation, and the rest of it. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of regularly, not just occasional videos, but an ongoing place for this kind of household knowledge, with somewhere to ask your own questions, that is what the community at that same link is for. I will not bring it up again in this video. Let me show you how far one batch can stretch, because the variations are where the real savings add up. Plain soft curds, drained for half an hour, give you a cream cheese substitute for spreading on bread or as a cheesecake base. Mix in some chopped chives, a little dried dill, and a touch of garlic powder before you finish draining, and you have the herb and garlic spread that costs almost $12 a pound at the store, made from the same batch for no extra cost beyond a pinch of dried herbs from your own cabinet. Press the curds firm for a few hours, and you have a block you can cube and pan fry, the Paneer style cheese for cooking. Press it firm and then crumble it with your fingers, and you have something very close to Queso Fresco for tacos or salads. And the bonus ricotta from the reheated whey gives you a small amount of a fourth thing, essentially for free. 1 pot of milk, 3 ingredients, several different results, depending on how long you drain or press it and what you stir in before you do. So here is the whole method in one sentence, because I want you to be able to carry this with you without needing to rewatch anything. Heat the milk until it is steaming and just beginning to bubble at the edges. Take it off the heat, stir in the acid gently until the curds separate from clear yellow-green whey. Let it sit for 10 minutes, strain it through cheesecloth, salt the warm curds, and then either drain briefly for something soft or press it under weight for something firm. Now, the honest math. A family that regularly buys a block of cheese, a tub of cream cheese, an herb spread, and occasionally something like paneer or ricotta is easily spending $60 to $100 a month on these, somewhere between $700 and $1,200 a year. A gallon of standard pasteurized whole milk runs around $4 to $5. The lemon juice or vinegar costs well under $1, and the salt is essentially free. That gallon yields somewhere between 1 and 1.5 pounds of cheese for a total cost of around $5, plus the bonus whey ricotta, plus whatever you use the rest of the whey for in your baking. A family that replaces even half of what they were buying with homemade versions of these same things is looking at savings in the range of $400 to $700 a year from a process that takes about 45 minutes, most of which is hands-off. Here is what I want you to do this week. Buy 1 gallon of standard pasteurized whole milk, the kind in the refrigerated case, not the shelf-stable boxed kind, and either a lemon or a small bottle of white vinegar. Set aside about an hour on a weekend morning. Heat the milk, add the acid, watch for the whey to turn clear, strain it, salt it, and decide in the moment whether you want it soft today or pressed firm. Either way, by mid-morning, you will have fresh cheese made by your own hands for about $5. Tell me in the comments, have you ever tried making cheese at home before? And if so, what happened? Or if not, what has stopped you until now? And if your mother or your grandmother had her own way of making farmer's cheese, or schmierkäse, or used milk that had soured on its own rather than fresh milk and lemon juice, I would love to hear about it. Those small inherited methods, the ones that were never written down because everyone in the family already knew them, are exactly the kind of thing that gets lost if nobody shares them. I read every single comment. Next time, since today was the simplest cheese there is, I want to show you the cheese that surprises people most the first time they make it themselves, the one that stretches when you pull it apart. Mozzarella takes this same idea one step further with one additional ingredient and a stretching technique that looks like it should not work the first time you try it, until it does. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Heat the milk, take it off the heat, stir in the acid until the whey turns clear, strain it, salt it, and press it, or don't, depending on what you want. That is the whole method, and that is how my mother taught me to make cheese standing on a stool at her stove. And it is how it is still done in any kitchen that remembers.